The Krillian swarm had devoured 17 star systems when they first encountered the small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. Commander Zex-9 studied the readings from his bioship's sensory organs, watching the data streams flow across his neural interface. The planet registered as inhabited by a bipedal species calling themselves humans. Another feeding ground, Zex-9 clicked to his lieutenant, mandibles chattering with anticipation. These mammals look soft and weak. Their technology is primitive compared to the Andromedans we consumed last cycle. The Krillians were apex predators of the galaxy, evolved from hive-minded insects that had grown to the size of starships. Their exoskeletons could withstand plasma bombardment, their acidic blood ate through most known metals, and their reproduction rate was legendary. When they swarmed a world, they left nothing but stripped bones and empty cities. Lieutenant Cax-7 flexed her razor-sharp claws as she reviewed the human data. They have no natural weapons, Commander. No claws, no fangs, no venom. Their skin is thin and easily pierced. They require tools for everything. Tools, Zex-9 laughed, a sound like grinding glass. The last refuge of the weak. Remember how quickly the Centaurian warriors fell despite their energy weapons? Remember how the crystal beings of Altair shattered when we overwhelmed their shields? The swarm had faced many species across the galaxy. The warrior culture of Centaurus Prime had lasted 3 days against the Krillian assault. The technologically advanced vegan collective had managed a week before their cities burned. Even the mighty Draconis Empire, with their energy manipulation abilities, had fallen in 2 weeks of fighting. Humans, by comparison, looked pathetic in the galactic database. They had been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. Their weapons were chemical-based projectiles and primitive energy beams. They had no natural armor, no enhanced strength, no telepathic abilities. They were just another soft species ready for harvesting. "Deploy the advanced scouts," Zex-9 ordered. "We'll begin with their outer colonies as usual. Once we've fed and multiplied, we'll move to their core worlds." The first Krillian bioships descended on Kepler 442b, a mining colony of 50,000 humans. The colonists' distress signals reached Earth within hours, carried by quantum communicators that the Krillians hadn't bothered to destroy. After all, fear was part of the feast. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the war room aboard the UES Defiance, watching the horrific footage from Kepler 442b. The Krillian warriors moved like nightmares made flesh, their chitinous bodies gleaming in the fires they had started. Human weapons bounced harmlessly off their natural armor while their claws tore through defensive barriers like paper. "Casualty reports?" Chen asked, though she already knew the answer would be grim. "Total," replied Colonel Martinez, his face pale. 50,000 dead in 6 hours. The Krillians didn't just kill them, Admiral. The footage shows they were feeding." Chen had read the reports from other species the Krillians had encountered. The pattern was always the same: swift, overwhelming force, complete consumption of the population, rapid reproduction in the conquered territory, then movement to the next target. Intelligence estimates? Based on observed patterns from their previous conquests, they'll spend 2 weeks consolidating on Kepler 442b. Their numbers will triple during that time. Then they'll move to Proxima Station, then Ross 128, working their way toward Earth. We have maybe 2 months before they reach the Sol system. The weight of command pressed down on Chen's shoulders. Humanity's greatest military minds were already working on defense strategies, but the reports from other species were discouraging. The Vegans had been more advanced than humans. The Centaurians had been natural warriors. The Draconians could manipulate energy with their minds. All had fallen. "What makes them so effective?" Chen asked the xenobiology expert, Dr. Patel. "Evolution perfected them for warfare, Admiral. Individual Krillians are stronger than most species' elite soldiers. Their exoskeletons can withstand temperatures that would melt steel. They feel no fear, show no mercy, and coordinate through a hive mind that makes them tactically flawless. But most importantly, They're not just conquerors. They're apex predators. They don't want to rule other species. They want to eat them. Chen studied the tactical displays showing Krillian capabilities. Their bioships regenerated damage during flight. Their warriors could survive in vacuum for hours. Their weapons were literally parts of their bodies, impossible to remove or disable. They had no supply lines because they created everything they needed from consumed biomass. Conventional warfare won't work, Chen realized. Every victory condition assumes the enemy has something to lose. The Krillians don't care about territory, politics, or resources. They only care about food. The Andromedans tried nuclear bombardment, Dr. Patel added quietly. The Krillians adapted to radiation exposure within days. The Syrians attempted biological warfare. The Krillians' immune systems evolved faster than any pathogen could spread. As reports continued streaming in from the destroyed colony, Chen made a decision that would define humanity's response. Cancel all conventional military preparations. I want every scientist, engineer, and tactical specialist focused on one question. Not how to fight the Krillians, but how to survive them long enough to find something they haven't adapted to yet. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't preparing for war. They were preparing to become prey and hoping they could learn to bite back before being completely devoured. Meanwhile, in the ruins of Kepler 442b, Commander Zex 9 felt satisfaction as his swarm fed and reproduced. The human resistance had been even weaker than anticipated. Their weapons were laughably primitive, their tactics predictable, their resolve breaking quickly under pressure. "Prepare for the next assault," he ordered, watching new Krillian warriors emerge from breeding chambers fed by human biomass. "These mammals will provide excellent nourishment for our expansion deeper into the galaxy." He had no way of knowing that his easy victory had been humanity's first lesson in an enemy they had never imagined. And humans, unlike every other species the Krillians had encountered, learned very quickly from their mistakes. Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the biological samples retrieved from Kepler 442b, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the microscope settings. 3 weeks had passed since the massacre, and the Krillian swarm was already moving toward Proxima Station. Every analysis confirmed what the Galactic database had warned them about. The Krillians were perfect killing machines. "Their cellular structure is unlike anything we've encountered," she reported to the Emergency Research Council. "Individual cells can operate independently for hours even after separation from the main organism. Their nervous system distributes consciousness throughout their entire body, making them nearly impossible to disable with targeted strikes." Admiral Chen listened grimly as she reviewed deployment orders. Proxima Station had been evacuated, its population relocated to fortified positions deeper in human space. But evacuation could only buy them time. Eventually, they would run out of places to retreat. "What about the psychological profiles?" Chen asked Dr. Morrison, the team's xenopsychologist. "That's where things get interesting," Morrison replied, pulling up holographic displays of Krillian behavior patterns. "Every other species they've encountered has followed predictable response patterns: fight, flee, or submit. The Krillians have adapted countermeasures for all 3 responses over millions of years of evolution." "And humans?" Morrison paused, choosing his words carefully. "We don't fit their evolutionary model, Admiral. Every species they've conquered has been specialized. Warriors who fight directly, technologists who rely on superior equipment, hive minds that coordinate perfectly, or energy manipulators who attack from distance. Humans are generalists." Chen frowned. "That sounds like a disadvantage." "In direct confrontation, yes. But consider this. When the Centaurians lost their weapons, they became helpless. When the Vegans' technology failed, they had no backup plans. When the Draconians were separated from their energy sources, they collapsed. Humans adapt to any situation because we evolved as persistence hunters on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. The briefing was interrupted by urgent communications from Proxima Station. The Krillian swarm had arrived ahead of schedule, but something unexpected was happening. Instead of the swift, overwhelming assault that had characterized their previous attacks, they were proceeding cautiously. "They're scanning the station more thoroughly than usual," reported Commander Torres from the observation post. "Almost like they're looking for something specific." Admiral Chen activated the quantum link to speak with her forward observers. "What's different about their approach?" "It's the defensive preparations, Admiral. When they analyzed our response at Kepler 442b, they expected the same tactics. But we've abandoned conventional defenses entirely. They can't predict our response because we're not following any of the patterns they've encountered before." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her research station. "Admiral, I think I know what's happening. In every previous conquest, the Krillians could predict their enemy's capabilities by observing their initial response. Warriors would gather their strongest fighters. Technologists would deploy their best weapons, but humans— We're doing neither," Chen realized. "We evacuated instead of fighting. We're studying them instead of attacking. We're not following any of the survival patterns they've evolved to counter." The tactical situation crystallized in Chen's mind. Humanity's apparent weakness was actually disrupting the Krillians' perfect predatory system. They were evolved to hunt specific types of prey, and humans weren't behaving like any prey species they had encountered. "Commander Torres, I want you to implement Protocol Mongoose immediately." "Mongoose, Admiral?" "Small, fast, unpredictable strikes. Don't engage their main forces. Target their scouts and support creatures. Make them adapt to threats they can't categorize." The first Mongoose strikes began within hours. Human Special Forces teams, equipped with experimental weapons designed specifically from Krillian biological analysis, began hitting isolated Krillian units. They didn't try to win conventional battles. Instead, they focused on creating problems the Krillians had never encountered. Sergeant Maria Santos led one such team against a Krillian scouting group on Proxima Station's outer ring. Her squad carried weapons loaded with modified industrial acids specifically formulated to interact with Krillian chitin in unexpected ways, not to penetrate their armor, but to make it conduct electricity. "Remember," Santos whispered to her team as they moved through the abandoned corridors, "we're not trying to kill them, we're trying to confuse them." The engagement lasted only minutes. Human forces struck fast, deployed their modified weapons, and retreated before the Krillians could respond effectively. But the effect was devastating to Krillian tactical planning. Their scouts returned to the swarm with reports that made no sense according to their evolutionary programming. Commander Zex-9 studied the reports with growing frustration. The humans had attacked with weapons that seemed designed to cause specific types of damage to Krillian physiology, but the weapons were completely ineffective for actually killing Krillian warriors. It was like being attacked by prey that understood predator anatomy better than the predators themselves. "They're not trying to defeat us in combat," Lieutenant Cax 7 observed. "They're studying our responses to different stimuli." "Impossible," Zex-9 clicked. "Prey doesn't study predators. Prey flees or fights. These humans are exhibiting behavior that doesn't match any known survival pattern." But the reports kept coming. Human forces were using sonic weapons tuned to frequencies that disrupted Krillian coordination without causing physical harm. They deployed chemical compounds that interfered with Krillian sensory organs in ways that suggested intimate knowledge of Krillian biology. Most disturbing of all, they were adapting their tactics faster than the Krillians could evolve countermeasures. Dr. Vasquez worked around the clock, analyzing data from every encounter. "They're trying to understand us the same way we're trying to understand them," she realized. "But they're evolutionarily programmed to categorize threats and develop responses. We're presenting them with threats they can't categorize." Admiral Chen studied the psychological profiles Dr. Morrison had developed. You said we're persistence hunters. What does that mean in this context? On Earth, humans evolved to hunt prey by following it until it collapsed from exhaustion. We weren't the fastest or strongest predators, but we were the most persistent. We could track an animal for days, forcing it to keep running until it literally died from fatigue. And that's what we're doing to the Krillians? In a way, yes. Every time they adapt to our tactics, we change the rules. Every time they think they understand our capabilities, we reveal new ones. We're not trying to overwhelm them with superior force. We're trying to overwhelm their adaptive capacity. The strategy was working, but at a terrible cost. Proxima Station was lost, and Ross 128 was already under assault. The Krillian swarm continued its advance toward Earth, but their progress was slower than any previous campaign. More importantly, their confidence was beginning to crack. For the first time in their species' history, the Krillians were encountering prey that seemed to understand them better than they understood themselves. And somewhere in the deepest parts of their hive mind, an emotion they had never experienced before began to take root: uncertainty. Human forces regrouped at Titan Station, the last major outpost before the Sol system. Admiral Chen looked at the tactical displays showing the approaching swarm and realized they had achieved something no other species had managed. They had made the galaxy's apex predators hesitate. But hesitation wouldn't be enough to save humanity. For that, they would need to do something that had never been done before in the galaxy's history. They would need to make the Krillians afraid. The Krillian swarm approached Titan Station with unprecedented caution. Commander Zex-9 had never experienced anything like the sensation crawling through his neural pathways. His species had no word for fear because they had never needed one. Yet something about these humans triggered responses in his primitive brain centers that his evolution had never accounted for. "Deploy full scanner arrays," he ordered, his mandibles clicking nervously. "I want every human defensive position identified before we begin the assault." But the scans revealed something that made his confusion worse. Titan Station appeared to be completely undefended. No weapons platforms, no military vessels, no fortified positions, just empty space structures and what appeared to be research facilities. Lieutenant Cax 7 studied the sensor data with growing unease. "Commander, this doesn't match any of their previous defensive patterns. They've had weeks to prepare, but there are no military installations visible." "A trap," Zex-9 decided. "They're hiding their forces." "But where? Our biosensors can detect human life signs through any known shielding technology. The station contains approximately 50,000 humans, but they appear to be civilians, scientists, technicians, support staff. No military personnel at all." Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the laboratory aboard Titan Station, making final adjustments to humanity's last desperate gambit. Around her, hundreds of researchers worked frantically on a project that had consumed every resource humanity could spare. They had studied Krillian biology, psychology, and evolutionary history. Now they were ready to test a theory that could either save their species or doom them completely. "Neural pathway mapping complete," reported Dr. Morrison. "We've identified the exact frequency patterns that trigger their coordination mechanisms." "Genetic analysis finished," added Dr. Chen from the biolab. "We understand how their adaptive responses function at the cellular level." "Psychological profiles verified," confirmed Dr. Petrov. "We know exactly how their hive mind processes threat assessment." Admiral Chen stood in the command center, watching the Krillian swarm approach through the viewport. "All stations report ready?" "Ready, Admiral," came the chorus of responses from research teams across the station. "Remember," Chen addressed the entire facility through the intercom, "we're not trying to defeat them in the way they understand defeat. We're trying to teach them something their evolution never prepared them for." The Krillian assault began with typical overwhelming force. Bioships descended on Titan Station, expecting the swift resistance and rapid collapse they had encountered throughout the galaxy. Instead, they found something that defied every predatory instinct they possessed. The humans didn't run. They didn't fight. They didn't even seem afraid. Instead, as Krillian warriors poured into the station's corridors, they were met by humans who approached them calmly, carrying strange devices that emitted complex patterns of sound and light. The devices didn't cause pain or damage. They did something far more disturbing to creatures evolved for perfect predatory efficiency. They forced the Krillians to think. Sergeant Santos, now leading a team of researchers rather than soldiers, approached a group of Krillian warriors in the station's main corridor. The massive insects raised their claws, expecting the familiar patterns of flight or futile resistance. Instead, Santos activated her device and spoke in perfectly translated Krillian. "We know what you are," she said calmly. "You are afraid." The lead Krillian warrior froze. The concept was so alien that his neural pathways couldn't process it. Krillians didn't experience fear. They were apex predators. Fear was something that happened to prey. "You have consumed 17 species," Santos continued, her device projecting complex mathematical models into the Krillian's visual cortex. Each species followed predictable patterns: fight, flee, or submit. But you cannot predict us because we are not following any pattern you understand. The mathematical models showed something that shattered the Krillians' worldview: statistical analysis proving that human unpredictability was increasing with each encounter, not decreasing. Unlike every other species, humans were becoming more dangerous as they learned, not less. Throughout Titan Station, similar encounters were taking place. Human researchers, backed by months of intensive study, were systematically dismantling the psychological framework that made the Krillians such efficient predators. They weren't attacking their bodies. They were attacking their certainty. Commander Zex-9 received reports from throughout the swarm that made no sense according to anything in Krillian evolutionary experience. His warriors weren't being killed or defeated. They were being confused, paralyzed by concepts their minds couldn't process. "The humans are projecting data directly into our neural pathways," CAC-7 reported, her voice carrying undertones of something Krillians had never experienced: uncertainty. "They're showing us statistical models of our own behavior patterns. They understand how we think better than we understand ourselves." "Impossible," Zex-9 insisted, but his conviction was wavering. Prey doesn't analyze predators. Prey survives or dies. "But what if?" CAC-7 asked quietly. "We're not the predators in this relationship." The question struck Zex-9 like a physical blow. For the first time in Krillian evolutionary history, an apex predator was forced to consider the possibility that it might be prey. Dr. Vasquez monitored the psychological effects from the station's central laboratory. "It's working," she reported to Admiral Chen. "Their coordination is breaking down. When they can't categorize us as prey, their entire behavioral framework collapses." "Casualty reports?" "None on either side. They're not attacking effectively because they don't understand what they're supposed to be attacking. We're not defending conventionally because we're not actually trying to stop them from taking the station." Admiral Chen smiled grimly. "We're teaching them to be afraid of us by showing them that they should have been afraid all along." The breakthrough came when Dr. Morrison successfully interfaced his psychological analysis device with a Krillian warrior's neural pathways. For the first time in galactic history, a Krillian experienced genuine terror as it realized the truth about humanity. Humans weren't a weak species that had somehow survived through luck. They were the galaxy's ultimate predators, so efficient that they had learned to hunt their own food sources to extinction and had been forced to develop agriculture to prevent their own predatory success from destroying them. so adaptable that they had colonized every environment on their homeworld, including areas that should have been completely uninhabitable. They were persistence hunters who had evolved to track and kill creatures larger, stronger, and better armed than themselves. They were pack hunters who could coordinate complex strategies across vast distances and time periods. They were tool users who could adapt any resource into a weapon. Most terrifying of all, they were the only species in the galaxy that hunted not just for food or territory, but for the intellectual challenge of overcoming seemingly impossible prey. The Krillian warriors' scream of terror echoed through the hive mind, carrying with it the devastating realization that the galaxy's apex predators had just encountered something higher on the food chain than themselves. Commander Zex-9 felt the wave of fear wash through his swarm and knew that everything had changed. For millions of years, Krillians had been the ultimate expression of predatory evolution. Now they understood what every other species in the galaxy had failed to realize. Humans weren't prey that had learned to fight back. They were predators that had learned to think. "Withdraw," Zex-9 ordered, his voice barely a whisper. "All units withdraw immediately." "Withdraw to where?" Cax-7 asked. "If these humans are truly apex predators, where in the galaxy can we hide from persistence hunters?" The question hung in the void between them as the Krillian swarm began its first retreat in species history, pursued not by weapons or armies, but by the terrible knowledge that they had encountered their evolutionary superior. Admiral Chen watched the Krillian bioships fleeing toward deep space and activated the quantum communicator. "Message to all human colonies. The threat has passed, not because we defeated them, but because we taught them what fear means." She paused, looking out at the stars where other species had undoubtedly detected the Krillian retreat and were struggling to understand what had happened. "Send a follow-up message to all known galactic civilizations. Humanity is now accepting applications for mutual defense treaties. It appears the galaxy needs better predators."